From the TBD studios, let's talk live with your hosts, Natasha Barrett and Melanie Hastings.
But you know, the old saying goes, you never get a second chance to make that very first impression.
But you can get a second chance at making a good impression. Life coach Jean Stafford is here with some tips on how you can salvage your reputation after a bad first impression. All right, Jean, I went into my job interview. I bombed. What do I do? Do I get a second chance? And what do I do when I get that second chance?
Hopefully you get a second chance. Of course, you have to ask for the second chance. But certainly you have an opportunity to go back in and maybe even speak to the fact that you feel like the first conversation didn't go quite the way you hoped it would. And then ask again for the person's time to maybe review some of the things that you feel like you could do better the second time around. Sure.
Do you think people will give you that, when it comes to an employer or a potential employer, will give you that second time around chance if you really bombed it?
Well, it does depend on the field that they have to choose from, doesn't it? If there's a lot of candidates and there's already someone who's made a particularly good impression, perhaps your chances aren't so good. On the other hand, if your resume is one of the stronger ones and they really do believe that there's a match between your skills and what they need, perhaps they're willing to give you another opportunity to talk.
And you're saying that the first impression is perhaps, the second impression is even more important than the first impression.
It can be.
And let's go through a few of the steps. You have 5 steps to a good first meeting. The first one is remembering details from the first meeting, actually, for the second meeting.
For the second meeting, yeah. Right. I always encourage people to make notes about a conversation. Don't rely on your memory. It's not really as good as you think it is. Particularly if you can make a note about something that the other person demonstrated some interest in, you can then use that information in the second conversation as an opener, form a question. That also gives you an opportunity to spend a minute or two establishing rapport with the person that you're trying to have the conversation with.
You also say try not to repeat yourself so much, but I think people get nervous and they fall into saying the same words that come to mind, and it's just kind of downhill from there.
Right, nervous chatter, right?
Or nervous giggles.
That too. You can avoid repeating yourself altogether if you allow the other person to do most of the talking. Most people enjoy the sound of their own voice a lot more than the sound of anyone else's voice, right? And so demonstrating that you can listen is a lot more difficult than demonstrating that you can do the talking. And it's also true that the person who does the most talking in a conversation is the one who tends to come away and think the other person is the one who's such a good conversationalist.
And I think the key, especially for a job interview, if you repeat the same answer that you said in the first interview, you don't look genuine. So make sure that you practice. Don't just rely on the first answers from the first time.
You look too staged.
Yeah.
Too over-prepared, I guess.
Authenticity is important.
But third step, you say over-prepare.
Certainly be prepared. Always prepare. Preparation prevents poor performance. There's the rule to remember. I always suggest to people that they be very clear about what outcome they're hoping to accomplish as a result of being in that conversation. So fast forward in advance. What do I want to walk away from this conversation with? And state that in advance. I'd like to talk to you about A and B, and then let's make a decision about whether it makes sense to go to a next step or not. And if it does, then you and I can decide what that step should be and how to do it.
What's something you think that people don't prepare for and they think they've got it down, but when they get in there, they aren't prepared? What's something?
A lot of people tell me, well, I'm just going to have the conversation to see what happens. That's not a plan.
That's a plan for disaster.
If you don't know where you're going, any place will do, right? And that's why I say be very clear about what outcome you're trying to accomplish as a result of the conversation, because that certainly increases the chances of you making that happen.
The big question I have is, after you have that first job interview meeting and they say, come back, just meet the higher-ups, and then what does that meeting bring? What are you supposed to get out of that meeting? What are you supposed to bring to it?
You have to decide for yourself, once again, what you want to get out of each and every one of those conversations. Certainly trying to build rapport is an important piece of that, but also getting agreement about any action that makes sense as a result of having that conversation. Where do we go from here? And you have to pose that question. To get
so put it out there.
That.
Put it out there.
Absolutely
Don't be afraid to put
it
it out there so you can get what you want or you need in the situation.
That also gives some structure to the conversation, and in my experience, people like to know that there's a structure. They like to know that there's an end point where this is going. It helps them manage their expectations, and they can perform a little better themselves in that conversation.
Because I think people get scared. You're in there and you're thinking, we're all thinking this, you know, but to actually say it is important. Okay, number 4, be grateful for the chance to meet again.
It's a wonderful opportunity to show appreciation to someone else. For example, thank you very much for giving me time in your day to sit down and talk with me. Most people will tell you they don't feel appreciated nearly as much as they think they should be by other people. And so it's an opportunity for you to give them a psychological stroke. It increases your own likability factor, and at the end of the day, we want to do business with, we want to help people who we like, and frankly, who make us feel good about ourselves.
And this is where the thank you note can come in too.
You bet, you bet. Always write a thank you note. It's a good follow-up to remind them that they did have that conversation with you, and they will then think back and have a mental picture of what that conversation was.
All right, Jean Stafford, very, very good tips. Good to see you again, too.
Thank you so much.